welcome to the inaugural Fujifilm X Summit for the North Americas. I'm Justin Staley from Fujifilm US. We've got joined here by two of my colleagues from Canada that you're going to be very familiar with from the Fuji Guys, Billy and Francis. And then we are joined from Colombia by our dear friend Daniel from Fujifilm Colombia. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Yeah, super excited to be here with everyone, and
exciting stuff.
Yeah, so that was a very interesting X Summit that we that just happened, and a lot of information, right, Justin?
Yeah, lots of information. I mean, the big news that everyone I think has been anxiously anticipating is the long-awaited follow-up to the XH1, the XH2S camera. And that really was the focus of what this X Summit was about. So why don't we start talking about that camera and its features and, you know, what we love about that camera. So I'm going to kick it off. Hey, Daniel, what was your sort of most impressive thing about the XH2S?
Thank you, Justin. It's a pleasure for me to be here, joining you guys, and of course to all of the people watching. For me, it's all about the new sensor. I mean, even though it has the same count of megapixels, I think it offers a whole new world of possibilities for not only the video world, but also for the photographer. So I think we're going to dive into a little bit more about those details, but I think it's definitely about the sensor. I'm really excited about how is that going to affect both the quality of video, the AF performance. I mean, we're going to have a lot of discussion about that.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, the new generation sensor, this 5th generation now, we're in the 10th year of X mount. So, you know, lots of development over the years, and sort of this 2nd generation of the H camera, that flagship camera that we have. Francis, from your perspective, what were you most sort of blown away by?
Well, just the camera itself, but to be more specific, as you might know, and some people might know, I'm a lot into video making. So all of the video aspect of this camera is very interesting and exciting to me. You know, things like 6.2K and then 4K 120. These are just incredible things for us personally as the Fuji guys, but I think also for a lot of content creators. And if we're thinking about, you know, filmmaking, 6.2K up to 30 frames per second, these are incredible things. And thinking about 422 10-bit internally, ProRes internally, ProRes RAW to a recorder. I mean, these are all very exciting things, obviously, about this camera on the video side of things.
Yeah, no, definitely the video capabilities, and as the world's more converging, right, more and more people professionally are shooting video or shooting a hybrid workflow, just having that camera that's got the capabilities of doing both.
Absolutely.
You know, we've been calling it the speed camera in the US, and by speed we're meaning anything moving, whether it's moving pictures or it's pictures of things that are moving at high frame rates. And so that's really kind of a great spot for us.
Yeah, and then speaking, sorry, Justin, about moving and all that, and then video and photo, you know, Daniel spoke about the stack sensor, and that's going to be a great help for all of these things. So in terms of video, we have less rolling shutter if we're to do panning and stuff like that, but also the ability to shoot in electronic shutter with basically, you know, low to no rolling shutter at all. These are great and exciting things as well. Definitely.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. It really is a step up in the camera world. I think going to that stack sensor really is adding a lot of features, a lot of functionality to the camera. So Billy, from your perspective, from your use of it and your applications, what did you love about it?
You know, I think for me, it's always been, you know, where Fujifilm products get to this level of, I guess, confident autofocus, right? Francis mentioned about, you know, a lot of content creation, and you know, one of the things we do a lot is to film ourselves, and just having that reliability, having autofocus stick I know from a video standpoint, it's great. It's always been kind of good, but with this 5th generation technology, I think the processor being very fast, very fast, like 2 times faster than previous generation, and also the sensor being very fast, it allows for every frame almost like every 2 frames to be used to calculate autofocus, auto exposure, and I think that's a game changer for our 5th generation technology, not just XH2S, right? But just the 5th generation technology in general, having this sort of subject tracking and sort of this deep learning, and so I think that to me is probably the biggest point here, because it benefits not just video makers, but also image makers, right? And stills, whether it be taking pictures of the family or doing professional sports and wildlife, just to be able to track, I think is my biggest point out of this whole announcement, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would say there, I agree with you 100%, Billy. From what I shoot and what I love to shoot, the AI autofocus really has me kind of just blown away. I've had it a few times. I was out messing around. I live on a lake, so I was out photographing birds. I heard ducks calling across the lake, and the autofocus of the camera, the bird detection, the bird tracking actually picked up the ducks before I could see them. And so to have something like that is able to focus a long telephoto lens very quickly, very rapidly, and see that, and the tracking box pick it up, follow it, or to pick up a bird where only the head was visible, where all you could see was the head of a goose, and it would actually pick that up and be able to track on that without seeing the entire body. So to me, these updates of that deep learning AI autofocus system are really phenomenal. And also, yeah, the stickiness and the tracking, and being able to now, if you're shooting video, run the camera in, run the camera out, and have more flexibility and more freedom to how it sticks focus and applies to that. So whether it's faces, animals, or even just regular zone tracking, or a single autofocus box, even a single small autofocus box is just so much more sticky and better in the way that it works now.
Yeah, and like that's kind of my dream, right? Like I think we're finally there. At least we have the technology to get us there. And I think Fujifilm has always been great in slowly refining this, and having sticky autofocus, having reliable autofocus, and now having the processing power to go with that, and the sensor in terms of its speed, right? And so I think Yuji was right when he talked about speed and power. I think 5th generation is exactly about that. 15 frames per second mechanical shooting. Basically buffer free, right? As fast as your card can kind of keep up with anything, and even your electronic shutter, right? We talked about 40 frames electronic shutter, but the readout speed on this new sensor is amazing in that you technically can just shoot 6.2K video, set a fast shutter speed, and film the actual still, right? And you can actually pull frames from this. And I think that it's kind of incredible that the technology, at least for Fujifilm, has kind of gotten there. And if we look at comparable to technologies, right, like what the XH2S has, it's in line in terms of technology with some of the leaders out there. Like the Sony A1 and the Nikon Z9, all those type of technologies up there. That's the same thing that's being applied, and at a camera that is smaller, lighter, and even less, right? Which is kind of incredible for us. And we always said APS-C is a great blend between balance of power and size and weight, and I think the XH2S is going to kind of do that for customers. So really looking forward to kind of putting this camera more to its paces in the next few months.
Absolutely.
And guys, we haven't. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Francis. Okay, thank you. We haven't even mentioned about the in-body stabilization system, which is also, I mean, you're having a world-class sensor on top of a world-class stabilization system, which opens a new door to new a whole bunch of new possibilities. So Francis, I think you're going to mention something along those lines. So please go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I was just going to say, you know, we sort of, it seems like we take in-body image stabilization now for granted. We were kind of going away without it. We're going to have 7 stops of stabilization in body, which is incredible. Like, to me, this is very impressive. So yeah, I did want to mention that, you know, in-body image stabilization is something very useful, both for photos and for video, obviously.
Yeah, and the processor actually has its own dedicated chip just to handle the calculations for that. And you know, from the development team, you know, they talked about how they've done sort of, you know, adjustments to the micro movements and the macro movements. So so different shift now can be kind of recognized so that you don't get sometimes that jerkiness. So hopefully, you know, as the product gets ready for launch, that these things are fine-tuned and really can be a powerhouse, not just from the photo side of things, of course, with, you know, longer lenses and whatnot, but also from a video side, right? Which means you can go gimbal free in certain scenarios, right? Like, I know we do our videos, and technically we don't use gimbals because we don't need to anymore. And you know, I think this IBIS technology is again being slowly developed, and I think we're going in definitely the right directions. And having, you know, the processor and the new sensor, that's kind of helping us, you know, achieve some of those goals, or at least goals that I've been hoping for with Fujifilm products.
Definitely. And also then that EVF, right? We now are using that high resolution EVF that we last saw in the GFX 100, right? So extremely high resolution, extremely high frame rates that it's running at, and just giving you that big, bright, bold view. And then add on top of that, that they've redesigned the optic on the EVF, right? So like you take an XT4 and you got to really center your eye behind it. You start to get a little out of center, and you start to see a little bit of field curvature in there. You start to see a little bit of the optical effect of the EVF, where this camera now has a much bigger high eye point type finder that you can see it clearer. Your eye can actually be not exactly in the middle behind it, and you can actually see the entire screen, and it's not sort of warped or curved or has any color, you know, aberrations to it. It's really a beautiful, big, crystal clear viewfinder.
Yeah, totally. I think that experience is probably one that prevents people who are still shooting with a DSLR to moving into sort of a mirrorless system. And I think the XH2S is going to give those customers really a pleasing view, not just like you mentioned, resolution, frame rate, but also the usability, right? Like you're talking some EVS, you kind of bend over and it's kind of blurry. And I think, you know, the development here is really the overall experience, right? We talked about hardware, right? What's new? I know, you know, we see there's now a dual slot for CF Express type B cards, and also, you know, still has the UHS type 2 cards as well. And I think that's a great addition because, you know, from a video standpoint, right? ProRes internal, I think that was of interest, right, for a lot of people. And ProRes is just an easy format to edit, especially it's not so power hungry for those with sort of older computers, but it is big in file size for sure. So definitely things to consider.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
The bit rates now too, right? The bit rates jumping up.
Yeah.
Before we were sort of limited to 400 megabits per second, and now, if my memory is correct, it's like 750 or something.
720-ish, and then ProRes is even higher bit rates, right? Like, so that's probably where the CF Express Type B cards are really needed in order to do those high bit rate ProRes formats. And it's not just one format, right? Like there's multiple formats that are available, which is, you know, great that, you know, Fujifilm was able to put all this in, including a proxy option as well.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, and while you're talking about formats, the HEIF format added also, right? So for stills, getting that sort of 10-bit JPEG now in camera, where the standard JPEG in camera, you're only dealing with an 8-bit file. So now having more richly colored JPEGs out of it, but also that compression algorithm, right? Phones, iPhones, you know, most media devices now shoot in that type of format. we're now having cameras starting to migrate into that just because you're getting increased image quality out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I played around with that. I'm super excited about this. I'm thinking I'm going to move away from JPEG onto HEIF just because, yeah, you get that extra, you know, depth and flexibility if you needed to ever do a little bit of retouching on these, you know, straight out of camera.
And
Right.
Fuji's film simulations are all there, which is awesome. And you know, we talked about, you know, film simulation. We talked about the 10-bit, like dynamic range, you know, is improved as well. And you know, from a photos perspective, is always great, but from a video perspective, even better. You get, you know, 14 stops plus stops of dynamic range. There's a new log format, F-log2, and that's going to really extend the dynamic range in the footage. So I think definitely looking forward to that, especially, you know, when shooting wide open with lenses. You want to, you know, create that nice shallow depth of field, but also be able to kind of hold all the details in that scene as much as possible. There's ProRes, right? I know we talked a lot of videos. Sorry, I want to jump on this, but like, unfortunately, all this technology, it just makes video so much better. And you know, I think this is interesting because ProRes RAW, you know, doesn't sound like a new thing, but it's new when it comes to X-Trans. You know, there was no X-Trans ProRes. You know, we had ProRes RAW with a GFX system, but it was using a Bayer filter array. And so having that for first time in X-Trans, you know, technology, it's awesome. Plus, you know, support for things like Blackmagic RAW as well. So, you know, in terms of fit for whatever ecosystem you're working with from a filmmaker perspective, this camera kind of just has almost everything, right? It's still not truly a dedicated, you know, cinema camera. It was never intended to be, but, you know, almost there as well. Sorry, Daniel, I kind of interrupted you there.
It's okay. I love the conversation that was happening because I always struggled a lot, and certainly for me was hard to understand at the beginning. But when we talk about image quality, it's not just about the megapixel count, because people might be a bit confused if they see it has the same or a similar pixel account as, for example, an X-T4. But all of the things you guys mentioned play a role into image quality. I mean, the formats, the bit rate, all of that is really a huge boost in this camera. So I think people need to analyze that from that perspective and not just from the megapixel count.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. We talk a lot about filmmaking here. I think it's not necessarily this camera just, it's not like it can't do photos. It does photos well. You know, has fast frame rate, has great autofocus. And truthfully, I've never had issues with image quality. Like, you know, whether it be 4th generation, 3rd generation, honestly, very happy with what the process files come out. You know, probably, you know, in my opinion, you know, one of the best straight out of the camera JPEGs or just straight out of the camera images. Great ability to do things like different film simulations. Like I like Astia, you know, so the skin tones, the blue skies, they kind of stand out a little bit more for me. You know, and white balance has always been, you know, great. And I know white balance is also being developed as well. And I think it from a still perspective, it's great, but technology of this camera just makes video so exciting, you know. So I'm really excited on all these things, especially, you know, 6.2Ks. Now the XH2S is still APS-C. You know, we know, you know, there's other cameras out there that are 35mm format. You got micro four thirds, and you know, APS-C I think is making this resurgent back into the cinema world, right? Because you know, we talk about large formats and you know, 35mm formats, but a lot of times you don't want so much isolation. Like I've seen some clips on Netflix recently, and there's just some shows that it's way too much overdone. It's like the subject's just like standing in front of nothing, and sometimes APS-C will give you that that depth, but still have that still
Moderate.
soft out of focus look in the background, right? And so that's really, I think key, and especially when you're doing tight shots to the face, you don't want like the nose to be out of focus with the subjects. And so, I think this sensor is really great for the cinema world, and obviously it's not new, right? Because it's kind of like Super 35 in terms of that format.
Yeah, Billy, I agree with you 100% on that. There's so many shows that if you see that and that effect, it's almost distracting. It distracts me from what the story they're trying to tell me is, because I'm looking at what's in focus or what's out of focus. And so it can be a little bit troubling there. But yes, there's that whole sort of inventory of PL mount lenses that were designed for Super 35 movie cameras that can be used. So whether you like, a vintage look, and so you might pick some optics to fit that look, or you want, extremely sharp, crisp, modern glass, you've got sort of the whole gamut of optics that will fit and cover this sensor.
Definitely. And I think the adaptability is key as well with, mirrorless in general, but let's say with the XH2S, adapting, like you guys said, PL mount lenses just opens up the world to just create, right? And that's the key. That's what you want, is create. You want a camera that makes you create stuff.
Yeah, and hopefully, we will for sure continue to push, the development team to put more and more and more video-centric features, right? We talked about PL mounts, and people like using, anamorphic lenses, and hopefully, more of that type of technology gets put into our cameras to support, using anamorphic lenses, and for more filmmakers as well. Although, like I said, I think with Fujifilm, what I've noticed is they've always taken small steps, like stepping stones to get to the point. Like, who could imagine now, when we first launched our camera, X series system 10 years ago, like video wasn't a thing, right? Like, it was just like the worst thing in the world, worst bit rate, the autofocus was bad, everything was, and now we're starting to see the shift in that. Like, we are getting really great. We make great lenses. Like, Fujinon has always been in the cinema world, but now this camera is, I think, very capable of things. Of course, with great lighting, every camera can be capable, but just the ease of use. I like full size HDMI, right? That's kind of out of the blue bit. Like, everyone asks for that. People always complain how micro HDMIs always break. Out of the box, the camera does come with a cable lock that's attached, so that you can clip the HDMI cable and the USB-C cable. There's 35mm connectors for headphone, microphone. So really, everything you need is kind of there. And with the new adapter from Tascam, like the XLR adapter, then you got audio set as well. Even though the camera does have a very good preamp, it's 24-bit audio inside, but you have the options of using balanced microphones through that adapter, and this camera supports it fully, right? With the firmware to power the adapter to get audio go through the hot shoe, which is, I think, pretty incredible that Fuji is able to do that too. So,
absolutely.
For me, always something really important to mention, especially to beginners or from people that come from other brands, is and I mean, this can be a little bit simple, but this camera is also an X mount. So if you come from an XT30 on XS10, you already invested in some good lenses. You just can put it directly to this camera and create content right away. So for me, this is something really important that Fujifilm has followed along the years, is you can grow in the system.
Totally. And you talked about content, Justin. I think we have some content to check out right now, right?
We got lots of great content to talk about, but we still have some accessories to talk about. Right? So we didn't get there. We got 2 new hand grips that we haven't even talked about, right? So standard vertical grip, and then this file transfer grip that adds another USB-C connection, additional antennas for Wi-Fi communication. So, things like Wi-Fi tethering are potentially going to be on the cards for the future, but also having that LAN connection in it, right? Being able to plug a LAN cable in and hardwire it into the internet. So if you are a sports photographer, if you are someone that's shooting and needs that content to be transmitted instantaneously to somebody else or to another location, you can do that. So if you're at a sporting event like the Olympics, they, tether their cameras up, being able to shoot it back to an editor back behind the scenes and being able to edit those pictures and pass it on, that capability is going to open up to our users also. And then that new accessory fan, right? This is was speculated about a lot about how we were going to cool the camera, doing all these, people were asking about 4K, what our frame rate was going to be, right? And T4, yeah, it can do 4K 60, but it can get pretty warm pretty quick. So now having a camera that is 4K 120 capable, right, and having the ability to do that, but having that accessory fan that integrates really well into the back of the camera, pulls power from that camera. And we've got lots of great clips and some footage that Daniel is going to share with us from Colombia, a project that was done in the jungles of Colombia just recently. So it's really hot, really bad conditions, and having this weather resistant fan being able to be used if you need it. So it's an accessory. We're not forcing you to have this piece, and it's auto controlled. There's actually firmware in the camera controls how the fan works, and you can say, hey, I want it to be, priority of cooling. I want it to be priority of sound, or man, it's really hot, I need this fan to run all the time. So you really have a lot of control and capabilities, and it's just seamless the way it plugs in, screws onto the camera, and off you go. It's seconds to attach it. It's like attaching a lens, not this big thing, and it's not there when you don't want it. So if you're someplace quiet and cool, and you're recording sound, you don't have that fan sort of whine or anything, the electrical noise, to give you any issues there. So it's really kind of a great piece for you. Anything
and
else,
I think you mentioned something that's key. It's the fact that it is an accessory, it is removable. So let's say I'm a stills photographer and I won't ever need it, then I will never put it on. So it keeps the camera small, but if you do need it, you have the option to put the fan. So rather than have a big and bulky camera with the fan integrated, you can just put it on if you need it, or remove it, or just not get it if that's not an accessory.
Same thing with the grip, right? Like if
Same
you're
thing.
doing vertical shooting and need more power, you can. Maybe you're a hybrid wedding photographer that does photo and videos. That's where having that grip is great. And then if you mentioned, Justin, we're not there yet, but in terms of sports photography and the Olympics, let's say, for instance, at least the technology is being developed to kind of support those scenarios, right? Multicam controls through the network connections and the things that we're doing today, right? Like we are on webcams here. The camera supports 4K 30 as a webcam. It's now a universal format, so you plug it in and it just detects. You don't need any software. So that's great that you have that capability. So technically you could live stream now as a webcam and still have that 4K quality coming in to be recorded, right? So definitely a very impressive camera, a lot of technologies.
A lot of
excited to see some of these clips. I know we did a project as well, and Justin, you have some projects to show us.
So thanks, Billy, for that lead in. Let's jump into one of the clips that we had here that we made in the US. We worked on a project with American photographer Aaron Anderson, and he took us on a little journey, a cinematic journey through the deserts of California with a woman and her motorcycle.
The story I tell is my wife. I bought her a camera and then I stole it shortly after and started using it.
Good. I like that. That's really beautiful.
I enjoy the challenge of photography in that you have one frame to try to tell a story. And that's what I started to explore really with Olympic athletes. That started spiraling into this meeting people and telling everyday stories, but telling them in a cinematic way. The main point of this concept really started a few months ago, where I met the model, Carolina, and we started talking back and forth about who she is and just kind of these different stories inside of the moto industry, particularly. So one of the ideas with the concept was this woman getting ready for a date. And I wanted it to feel like, oh, she's standing by the window and looking outside and waiting for this person to arrive. But then in hindsight, it's a motorcycle. This is what she's been getting ready for. This is what she's excited about, is her and her motorcycle on the open road. Once I start talking to the talent and getting their feedback as well, because then when we get on set, she understands what we're trying to accomplish, and she can help me further that story along and make it even more effective. The XH2S, there were many times where I wasn't even thinking about it, which to me, that's exactly the way it should be, because then the talent starts to lose interest, or the people who are with me start to lose interest, and I'm just sitting there staring at the back of my camera. Even being inside of the van, we were capturing videos and still images at the same time. And in one place, I'm doing high frame rate stills, and in the second, I'm doing 4K 120 video. And it wasn't a weird process. It was really more about me moving into the seat than it was about changing anything on the camera.
Super fun. That's awesome. Oh my, it's so moody. I love it.
Photography was one of the careers I chose because I get to work with people and I get to meet people all the time and hear stories and interact in different environments. The other thing that's really important to me in my life is experiences. And so photography is this awesome mashup of like people and experiences where you're hanging out of the back of cars or whatever it is, and you feel so much closer and engaged with the people around you. And that for me is really what photography allows me to do. And so that's, in a nutshell, why I've done so many different things, but why I landed on photography is because of this awesome interaction where I get to meet people and go out and do awesome things with those people.
So that was some great little footage there we saw from Aaron Anderson. I was fortunate enough to be on location with Aaron during that project, and just the way that that early camera, he was using it, working with it, and being able to bounce back and forth and do all different kinds of shoots. We ran around a location all day, from the back of a minivan to shoot tracking shots on a closed course to, you know, the scenes that you saw there, that old sort of abandoned gas station look, to an old bus that was literally used as the set for her getting prepared and getting dressed in the beginning of it, and then to another location, another old house that we had that we worked in. So working in a variety of locations, from daylight situations into lit situations for Aaron, and just that look and the feel of those images that he created from that just really has a, as he said, a cinematic take on it. And I just think it's really beautiful and just showcases the versatility of the XH2S.
So I do want to touch on something, because he did mention, you know, he was shooting photos and videos. Now, I don't know what his workflow was, but I can speak for myself in the fact that C1 to C, is it seven position? Yeah, you can customize them to be, you know, presets for either video or photo. And I think that is key if you're a hybrid shooter. I know me and Billy, we talked about that, you know, for our personal, well, not personal, for FUJI Guys channel, having, you know, C1 as being the main talk. So 6.2K at 24 frames per second, having the C2, which would be the B-roll setting. So 4K 120. And then you can have the C3 as your main, you know, shooting stills, sort of raw plus HEIF, film simulation, focusing you want. So this really makes it like a very appealing system if you want to quickly shoot video and photo. So that's just kind of a side note and sort of a highlight for me, I think, having these custom positions.
I saw that same thing when he talked about, you know, being to go from stills to video, and you know, this is why the camera doesn't have like a movie photo switch like the XT4 is, because if you had that, then you couldn't set these C1s to quickly jump from photo to video. And the same idea with, you know, not having the autofocus switch that usually found on the front of most Fuji cameras, right? Like continuous autofocus, manual focus, and then single autofocus. It's just a button now, and it makes total sense if you're a hybrid user now to jump quickly, and not even a hybrid user, even from a photo standpoint, right? You can jump from one setting to another, whether it be, you know, manual focus and then jump to autofocus, or jump to continuous focus with a zone, so that you can track a moving subject, right? Let's say you're doing pictures of birds and it's sitting on a branch, right? You can have it set to C1 to be single autofocus with the point. And then the bird starts to fly away. You can set C2 to become sort of wide tracking and with continuous autofocus instead. And I think that's kind of, you know, what's key. And not to say that's what's happening here, but yeah, footage was amazing, by the way. That BTS footage is all filmed with the XH2S. And then, you know, I looked at the scenes carefully to see the shallow depth of field, the mood, the look, even the grain structure in some of the low light situations. It is, you know, very pleasing, right? Like no camera is clean in terms of noise, but like to have the noise not look like sort of this color noise, and it's just more granular, I think gives that nice appeal and look to the that BTS footage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Billy, just to add on to that, the interview pieces that we did with him wearing a black shirt on a black background and being able to discern the tonality between the two, him not just being really a floating head, not being this thing that you can actually see the texture in the background, and there's a separation there, and that was a black velvet background, right? That was a black,
right,
you know, flocking background. So it just sucks up light. But being able to see that and catch that nuance there and the dynamic range of the video, that really speaks to what this camera is capable of doing in a cinematic sort of application, or in a interview application.
Absolutely.
Following along those lines, what you guys were mentioning, I mean, you can see on the footage that the camera was tested. I mean, the conditions of lighting was hard. I mean, you have backlight, you have sand, which always throws up some autofocus systems. And what you guys were mentioning, having the flexibility of having different autofocus options, you just have to turn a dial and just go with the flow is really useful. And I mean, Erin put them in great use.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one thing that the model mentioned was moody, and I think that represents really sort of the essence of this whole video is really like there's sort of that mood, that atmosphere that, you know, I don't know if I can attribute it to the Fujifilm colors or just, you know, director's point of view, but it really had that sort of mood and atmosphere that was really pleasing to me.
Yeah, it was a fantastic little way to kick off the content that we're seeing from this camera.
Right.
So let's shift to something different. Billy, you've got a clip you want to introduce from a photographer in Canada.
Yeah, it was a local cinematographer and DP named Dale Sud, and he just made this little short doc. So let's go and check this out.
One spark started the fire. When I won my first race, all I wanted was to keep winning. It fueled a fire to always push, to be out front.
Ben Coggin absolutely rocking a whole shot for that NBA crew with one hand on the bars. What a man, Ben Coggin, coming back at this photo on that 76 MPA crew.
That's all it takes sometimes. One golden moment in time to change your life forever.
Wow, a man of many Kongs. Kong Daddy. and it looks like Ben Kong Manny is getting the whole shot on the 96 KTM.
Everyone down there just a scalded hate to crush the Empire State Building.
Every race, every ride is a fight between Earth and my machine.
Behind me cheering for that 76 of Ben Kong.
Where gravity can be my friend or instant my foe. And you don't win races by following everyone else. You win them by taking the fastest line that no one else is looking at. Off my bike,
I'm dreaming about each turn, each rut, each jump. Where I'll play it safe and where I'll go all out. When I step onto the track, I'm ready to pack away my fears and go as hard as I can. These moments are everything to me. On my bike, I answer to no one. But winning doesn't happen on the track. It starts at home. Without my sponsors, my coach, and my parents, I couldn't win. That first trophy was the spark. But they are my fuel.
Wow, Billy, that was a pretty little amazing project you had there. What else can you tell us about it?
Yeah, the story is just about a young teen. His name is Ben Kongmani, and basically his family's of Thai descent, and just in a sport like motocross, which is generally run or like with people that are not from Thailand, right? And so it was kind of an interesting story, and the idea was to start with thinking that this person was older than he was, and it really is this young teen at the end of it. And it was just a quick project to kind of test out the XH2S in terms of working with a small crew, right? Like just really literally only 2 shooters to create this content, and with very minimum setup as much as possible. So a lot of ProRes internal recording, and a lot of 4K 120 footage, as you can see there.
Yeah, and I can definitely see how the 4K 120 benefits in this type of action sports thing. You can see the ramp slow-mo, which definitely adds a lot of dramatic wow effect of just going super fast and then all of a sudden slows down. Definitely added to the production value for sure.
I think in this kind of situation is where the in-body image stabilization really shines, because you want to be creative, you want to be able to set up creative shots, you want to get on the ground, and you want to do some pans, some creative movements, and you need to have that kind of stabilization that really gives the quality of the image.
Yeah.
Really being a versatile handheld camera, sort of a crash cam type camera system, but having autofocus, having all that capability. So yeah, you can shoot a really low angle or a really high angle, get the camera basically in the dirt. So you're getting that perspective. I love that shot with the motorbike coming around the corner, and it's sort of that rooster tail of dirt coming out behind you, right? And that 4K 120, just that resolution, and also then that speed, being able to slow it down, making that dirt just kind of feel, that visceral feel of it, more the emotion of it, and not just documenting what was actually happening in front of the lens.
Yeah, and as Billy mentioned, it being a small crew of 2-person really shows how much you can do. Like looking at this video, you wouldn't think like there was only 2 guys filming it. It looks really good, professional, polished. So again, just shows like versatility, mobility, sort of the whole aspect of the XH2S for sure.
So now we're going to move from a small crew project from Canada to a larger crew project with Daniel and the team in Colombia.
Reencuentro es una historia que habla sobre la reconciliación, cómo personas que piensan diferente y que sienten diferente pueden convivir en un mismo espacio. Es una historia esperanzadora que muestra que podemos convivir incluso si pensamos diferente. Hay que intentar vivir todos en el mismo sitio, en el que nos tocó, en el que es nuestra patria o nuestro país o nuestra región, y hay que intentar convivir.
Y el personaje que interpreto se llama Adela y es una maestra en un corregimiento pequeño en algún lugar de la costa atlántica. Es una mujer que no tiene ninguna afiliación política, no es ni de derecha ni de izquierda, solo quiere que las cosas sean justas, tratar de reconstruir algo que es muy importante para ella, que es la posibilidad de que los chicos vuelvan a estudiar.
La historia de una maestra en un pueblo que está en medio de un conflicto armado, que están en la mitad de todo sin poder decidir, como qué es lo que hace ella para mejorar y aportar a esa sociedad, como mujer, como maestra, como una representante importante de los caracteres de la sociedad.
Son las mujeres las que pueden lograr esa reconciliación y son las mujeres como reparadoras del tejido social. Es posible convivir en paz aun cuando se piense diferente.
Lo primero es encontrar un personaje como Adela, que es un personaje que trabaja desde su fuerza interior. El personaje de Adela es universal porque la reconciliación debe ser universal. Esta historia se desarrolla en un pueblo muy parecido al pueblo donde yo nací, ¿no? Y es reencontrarme con gran parte de lo que yo soy.
Escogimos Río Cedro porque parte de la historia tiene que ver con el abandono estatal.
Nunca hubiera podido contar esta historia si no hubiera sido en ese lugar, donde realmente se vive, pero hay seres humanos bondadosos que han sufrido y que están dispuestos a reconciliarse y a sanar.
Entonces, Río Cedro se prestaba muy bien para este tipo de narración, pero sobre todo daba la imagen, daba el look de un pueblo abandonado.
Los grupos armados fuera de la ley, pues tienen el poder sobre esa zona. Y sin embargo, es gente que no es violenta.
Si no somos capaces de perdonar, de reconciliarnos, lo único que va a suceder, como ha seguido sucediendo a lo largo de años, es que van a cambiar los victimarios.
Si no pensamos en la reconciliación y en la sanación y en el perdón, no la logramos. No tenemos un futuro. Lo que yo quiero que la gente se lleve es la esperanza, es el amor, es la posibilidad de perdonar, es la posibilidad de sanar y de reconciliarse.
Nunca es tarde para soñar, nunca es tarde para lograr cosas, nunca es tarde para cumplir tus metas, tus sueños. No hay que abandonar los sueños.
Que no se den por vencidas nunca. Que si yo no lo hice, mucho menos ellas.
Encontrar una historia que no tiene ese objetivo, sino que de verdad tiene un objetivo que puede cambiar vidas y permitirme ser parte de esa historia es más de lo que yo puedo soñar como actriz y como persona. Yo quiero seguir a través de mi arte o a través de lo que soy o mi palabra o de simplemente estar, inspirar a la gente a que siga soñando. Gracias por dejarme.
Yo como mujer con ese personaje siento que en mi profesión ese es como el aporte que yo le puedo hacer a la sociedad. Cuando me veían dirigiendo, cuando veían a Indira, cuando veían a todas estas mujeres guerreras, muchas ya son así o quieren serlo. El tema con los niños es bien especial, pero siento que la espontaneidad que tiene el niño cuando estás hablando de algo que él conoce o que es su realidad, o cuando lo pones como un juego, Entonces, tanto el trabajo, yo sé que trabajar con niños, animales, en pueblos y todo eso es durísimo, pero pienso que todo confluyó de una manera que funcionó, puede decirse que milagrosamente.
De pronto, si tenemos suerte, uno de ellos dice, yo estuve en una película cuando era niño, yo quiero hacer eso, y de pronto encuentra el camino. Creo que la única posibilidad de que esto se siga transformando es que todos los que sabemos podamos transmitir nuestro conocimiento para que cada vez haya más gente trabajando con conocimiento y con formación en el audiovisual.
Sinceramente, el mayor reto al que nos hemos enfrentado, yo diría que es el clima. La cámara estaba constantemente encendida en ese clima y con esa humedad. Entonces, yo creo que eso fue, digamos, una prueba de fuego, ¿no? Funcionó bien, realmente. No tuvimos problemas con el calentamiento de la cámara. Pues mira, trabajar con equipos pequeños lo que te da es la rapidez.
Si yo me fuera con otra cámara, que son más grandes y con una óptica fija, creo que no hubiera logrado coronar el plan.
Cambios de locación con lancha, a pie, con motos, en burro. Esta es una cámara versátil que tiene un rango dinámico amplio.
Es que son capaces de dar una calidad de imagen excepcional, ¿sí? Por un coste muy bajo.
Un espacio de color maravilloso.
Y lo primero que a mí me gusta y me ha gustado siempre de Fuji es el color. Y haber puesto la cámara en el río, ¿sí? En mitad del río. En el tiempo que se hizo con una cámara grande no hubiera sido posible.
Yo creo que la idea de tener una cámara pequeña con unas condiciones técnicas muy buenas es una idea que le pega muy bien a Latinoamérica.
Porque eso me parece que hay que subrayarlo mucho. Pequeño no quiere decir que la imagen que esté dando sea pequeña. Lo que daba era la posibilidad de ir más rápidos. Creo que el futuro de estas cámaras es claro. Va a permitir que muchos cineastas les permite seguir rodando, sinceramente. Y eso es muy bueno.
So, wow, Daniel, that's some pretty amazing footage we just saw there from, I know, Colombia, and I heard from some of the crew on location that it was faster to get to locations via boat than by car. That, or walking would be faster than actually getting there because you were in a pretty remote locations for this.
Yeah, it definitely was very tough on them. I just want to mention this was written by Cecilia Vasquez. The cinematography was done by Adriana Bernal, and the technical director was Alfonso Parra, a world-class crew, and they were definitely put to the test. So, and also the camera. I mean, they were in extreme conditions of heat, humidity, there were sand, water, natural actors. I mean, everything you don't want to come across on a production. And it was really tough on them. And they told me they were in a really tight schedule, and the camera was running all of the time. I mean, they began early in the morning, they started shooting, a quick lunch break, continue filming. And so it was definitely a test to the camera. And they mentioned, of course, it was really important to include the fan, because in those conditions you want to keep the camera cool. So I mean, the footage is beautiful, as you guys could appreciate.
Yeah, and just the dynamic range that it captured, right? In all kinds of conditions. We have scenes inside where the exterior is not blown out, that you're actually getting good shadow detail and tonality on, that one scene where there's a beautiful blue chairs in there, and then I can see outside to the palm fronds and stuff. And it just blows me away. And also there's a couple other scenes that just extremely low light, there's a sort of a lantern lit scene that just is absolutely gorgeous and stunning in the way that it looks.
Yeah, totally a contrast from the last footage we saw, which was, you know, shot with, you know, lenses like the XF 150 to 600, which is a new lens that was talked about at the summit, but also, you know, a more affordable cinema lens, the MKX lenses were used in that production. And so you can see a stark contrast between production levels and the two films and the flexibility of the system, right, to go from one to the other. And I think that's where that hybrid, you know, nature of it. It's not just hybrid stills, but hybrid cinema, right? So the expandability from sort of what they said as a naked system, you know, just a camera and lens, to this full-fledged, you know, cinema rigged with permistas and everything. And you can see, I love the footage, you know, I love the cinematography. It's like, I have this great thing about cinematographers, like, and DPs. Like, I think, I don't hate to say it, but I find them better sometimes than photographers. Like, they have the perfect frame. Like, every movie I watch, I was like, man, I wish I had a still of that, you know, and that be my picture, because it's just a perfect framing to the story. And so yeah, that content is really excellent. And XH2, you know, no doubt, it's very, very capable, and it's especially in great hands of these filmmakers in Colombia there.
And so, Daniel, I think for this short film, you guys used the MKX lenses, which again is a very affordable cinema, high quality lens lineup that, you know, is native to the X mount. So how was that, you know, like, how did it help in the production, you think?
Absolutely, and you put it perfectly. I mean, for an H2S and you put in MKX, it's like a really affordable, and I mean, you can see the quality of the image. This is really cinematography, high quality kind of material. So I mean, it's still easy to carry a lens. It's affordable. So I mean, you get a world-class package with that kind of a bundle.
Well, we're going to jump into another clip right now from an American cinematographer, Jasmine Quinones.
I really have just not been open and vulnerable to saying something like with my own like unique personal voice. When I got the call to do the project, I was like, are you serious? This is really happening right now. And Olivia, action. Cut. Money. We got it. That was good. I'm a very tech editor, so I was always good at making like really cool tech edits. I think I just started to feel a little bit empty just making that type of stuff. Something that I really want to break into more is to try to tell my own story, and especially being a woman in filmmaking and being Latina, being queer, like all of these identities that I hold are identities that like people don't get to see that often. It matters to people who look like me, and it matters to see that. And I think that it's really important. Skateboarding is about pushing yourself, and I've always been someone that's been very, very interested in like going against the grain and pushing against boundaries, because I feel like my identity is just always pushing against every boundary, every box, every person that wants to think very black and white. This story is about me, but it's told through the lens of skateboarding, and it's an ode to skateboarding and what it's done for me. But ultimately it is about me and how I've just been afraid to really go full throttle on embracing who I am and just not caring about what others think. At the end of the day, I just really want people to watch this film and feel like they can be who they want to be. It's really cool to see girls skating that like they look like me, and they got the curly hair and they're skating around, and that's so exciting. I'm like so excited for this future of skateboarding. It's already amazing. Shooting skateboarding, it's fast moving, so having the autofocus on the camera, that was much quicker than other models that I've used before. That was really, really beneficial. I wanted to get a lot of slow motion tricks for this film, And I really loved the ability to switch to the 4K 120, and it looks so clean. Like I saw some of the clips and I was like, oh, this looks so good. I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to be the safe filmmaker anymore. I want to put something out that like really hits deep with people, as opposed to just creating just to put something on Instagram. There's just so many trivial little things that we think about and that we stress ourselves about, and they don't matter. At the end of the day, it's like, if you want to do something that makes you happy and if you want to present yourself a certain way, cut out all the noise and just do what it is that you want to do. Because if that's going to bring you joy, then that's going to bring you joy. And I want people to do that, because it's been very fulfilling for me. And I hope that people take that away. And I hope people start skateboarding more after they see this, because like that would be cool.
So we just got to see all of this BTS footage there from Jasmine. I mean, I know they shot this in Austin, in the heat of Austin, Texas in the summertime. So that's, one thing to take into account. But just seeing her skateboarding and tracking somebody, and it speaks to the autofocus system, even in video applications, but also the workflow that she has. And this not getting in the way of her creativity, and just being able to work with a small, lightweight camera system to capture the images and the feeling and the experience of being there.
Yeah, I think definitely the size of the camera is taken into account. Growing up skateboarding, you want that small camera. Usually you have the handle on it. I'm reminiscing about, VX 1000s and all. So definitely, having that small, lightweight, because you're often just following the person that's skating on your board, and you need to be able to, hold the camera for long times and then repeat tricks. That's actually one of the worst part I can remember about skateboarding, is trying to trick and over, and you have to do it over and over. And that's why I didn't like to be a filmer back in that day, because again, it's just, trials and trials. So I think that the small size and the lightweight of the camera is definitely key in that sort of application. And that's kind of my take on that. Right.
To me, it's 4K 120. I mean,
for sure,
if you want to make footage looks good, skateboarding 4K 120 is the best, right? And when you film in that frame rate, you start to appreciate how difficult some of these tricks are, right? Like, and here we're talking about a story about females doing skateboarding, and this is, obviously, great, and it's opening up the, that sport, which, I think in the past was maybe male dominated, but like it's changing, and skateboarding is the thing that trends, right? It trends fashion, it trends, hardware. And we look at skateboarders, and they're not filming with like inexpensive equipment now. Like, they want the best equipment possible, right? And here's a camera that's capable of all this. And to me, again, 4K 120, I think, is a killer. And you can see that in the footage. Definitely great way of using it, just to create really cinematic content.
One key aspect for me is something you get when you use this kind of small rigs is intimacy, where you're shooting people, let's say not actors, but doing documentary, doing interviews. The fact that you have a small equipment makes people a lot more comfortable. So Francis was mentioning the fact that you're repeating a trick over and over again, and if it involves a huge crew, like you're disappointing a lot of people, this takes away that from the equation and just gives that natural. And I mean, you can definitely tell that she's having a lot of fun. She's riding along the people. She's huge smile, just enjoying the fact that it's just an extension of herself, the camera.
Yeah, I think it was a fantastic little clip there, and really sort of gives you the feel and that sort of sensation of being on a skateboard and moving. And I wasn't a skateboarder, so I can't speak to that, but I really kind of get that sensation of that you'd have doing those tricks and moving that way, and just having that sort of that really fly on the wall documentary look and feel that's this camera can give someone for a project.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to just add more to this, but like Francis and I, we also were filming, and you know, you saw the camera used on the gimbal, but actually, you know, using some slow-mos like 4K 120, you can actually hold the camera without that much gear if you wanted to. Like if you wanted the naked system, you could do that and still get really great cinematic shots, just because 4K 120 allows for that steadiness of the movement.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, like I'm just thinking back now, like IBIS is such a great tool, because back in, I hate to say in my days, but in-body image stabilization wasn't really a thing. So we would filmers, like we would choose friends as filmers that had like steady hands and could be steady on the board, so that the footage wouldn't look shaky. So you wouldn't want to go film with this guy because he was shaky. And then, having IBIS in the camera really helps, I'm sure, with that kind of shooting. So that's just one more thing that I'm just thinking of now. Like it must be so good having in-body image stabilization for that kind of shooting, for sure.
So yeah, we've got one more video we want to share with you, and that's from an American cinematographer, Gino Willard, and it's a short little documentary utilizing some underwater housings.
I feel like I can get caught up in being at the studio every day and being real inspired and having new ideas and drawing them and making them and seeing them through and then shooting them, and that's like really stimulating and feels really good and productive, especially if the waves aren't that good. It's easy to like favor working on clothes over surfing, but if the waves are good and I'm on a trip, that's like everything to me. I realized I actually loved surfing before I feel like I even started surfing. Just hearing my dad's stories about when he was a kid, his idols, and the way that he and his friends would talk about it, and the way that skating and surfing just went hand in hand in their friend group growing up, and how switched on it had them, just made me realize that I was obsessed with it. If they liked it, I loved it.
So we've seen like all kinds of amazing work produced today, and this last piece here that we just watched, working with an underwater housing, our friends at Aquatech have developed that for us, and having all these other accessories available for this camera, and just this flexibility and movement, a small lightweight camera that you can now take into the surf and go underwater with it and film underwater, and get 4K 120 underwater if you want. And having that flexibility is just a phenomenal little system we've got building here.
Absolutely. It's quite impressive. I mean, anytime you see footage underwater, to me, is sort of, it's unusual, so it's always impressive. But having that, possibility with this camera is definitely really interesting, for sure.
Yeah, I think this is where those C1, C7 positions come back, right? Like I've shot with like underwater housings before and have scuba dived before, and when you're underwater, like you can't think too much, and so just having the ability to switch between different modes or different settings if you were doing photos or videos, I think this is where it comes in handy, right? Like there's limited controls. So I mean, a lot of the water housings and more professional ones have access to every button, but just being underwater, having your breathing gear and everything with you, you just that simplicity to do that, I think honestly makes this camera really great for that type of scenario, and hopefully they were able to use that feature. And I think that's, to me, was again, I'm gonna love setting up this camera for my own personal use and for like our channel to create content. And next time, I know, Francis, you and I were going to go out, we're going to have C1 to C7 set up for everything. We're going to label it so we know, B-rolls and talking points and slow-mos, so super excited to get that, because it is a pain for us when we're filming, right? To kind of stop and try to change settings, we got to take a picture of this bird. Oh my God, let me change the autofocus. And, you don't have to do that now with having these custom settings. I think that was cool. And the footage obviously is quite amazing. The fact that it's going to launch with some companies already kind of preparing accessories for it, right? We have the underwater housing, but you also mentioned, Justin, to us about just the grips, I guess, or the
cage.
The cages.
Camera already will have a cage available when the camera's available on the market. So to have that capability, also having a cage ready to go when the camera's first out, that's a big deal. And it's got a really cool feature about it. It's got a PL mount adapter that you can buy for it that actually attaches to the camera and then bolts onto the cage. So if you wanted to use larger lenses or heavier lenses in PL mount, it really creates a nice rigid mount for you to mount the camera in there. You're not putting excess strain on the lens mount of the camera to have it, to use a big old PL mount lens if you want to.
Right.
For me, this camera is like a love letter to creativity, actually. I mean, you can jump around being a photographer, being a videographer, go underwater, do cinematography, do like casual shots. I mean, you pretty much can do everything. Me, for example, after seeing this video, I'm more of a stills kind of photographer. So I want to explore a lot more about video after seeing this. I want to get underwater, and I know that this camera is capable to do all of that. So I think it's as Billy was mentioning, a camera I look forward to having always with me to carry on trips, on work, on every scenario.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, it's a phenomenal little piece. But let's jump into the other lenses that were announced, right? So we've got 2 new optics that were announced, and then we have a new XF lens roadmap we should talk about quickly, right? So first off, let's jump in to the XF 150 to 600 millimeter lens. And, I've had a little bit of a chance to use it here. Billy, what's been your feedback on it so far?
I like the fact that it's all inner focus, right? Like this lens, I don't know if they we never had a super telephoto zoom in this category with that reach, and having all kind of, we know what the size is in terms of internal zooming. I think is going to be great, and I think nature watchers and nature photographers will love this lens, being lightweight, but also just that size is perfect. And we have a lens like the 100 to 400, but this one just has that little bit more reach, and then it's also compatible with the 2 teleconverters, right? So the 1.4 times and the 2 times. So very versatile lens. I think going to be very popular. It's a missing lens in our lineup in terms of that reach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, getting out to that 600 millimeter focal length It makes it equivalent to 914 millimeters in 35 millimeter format. So that's a lot of reach. And then the OIS on, that's the thing that impressed me most about it, was out to that kind of a focal length, 600 mil, and having, you know, the IBIS, the OIS working together, and that thing just being rock steady and panning with it and not fighting you. I mean, that's one of the worst things about, you know, those systems. So OIS or IBIS on long lenses, sometimes if you're panning, it just wants to fight you, and just like it kind of lags and then jumps to catch up with you. This lens does none of that. And being able to there shoot long exposures with that, capture the moon, capture long landscapes. I mean, this lens to me has so many uses that, you know, it's kind of endless. And the f-stops being, you know, 5.6 to f8, I know some people would probably want that lens to be faster on the long end, but then you're sacrificing size, you're sacrificing the portability of it. And that to me is the other amazing thing about how small, how compact it is, and that internal zoom setting. You're right, Billy, that's just, to me, makes it so simple to throw it over my shoulder, you know, use the strap lugs on it with an extra strap, lens goes over my shoulder, and I forget I'm carrying it. But it gives me that reach when and if I need it.
Yeah, and then I like, you know, I'm one for small little details. I do appreciate the fact that, you know, we have a foot that's Arca Swiss based, so you can just slide it onto a quick release that's Arca Swiss. But also, I'm not really a telephoto kind of guy, but I was shooting it, you know, testing it out, and you know how people just put the foot on top usually so that it's not in the way, but you can actually remove it if you want it. You can unscrew it and remove it, so that way you don't have that foot, you know, on top of the lens. So that's one tiny detail that, to me, you know, it makes a difference. You know, you can just remove that foot if you're not going to use it.
Yeah, I mean, you have it on a tripod, then basically you can just unsnap that foot off and then shoot. You know, if you wanted to pan and look for a bird, right? Because, you know, this lens, I think it's not just for photos. You know, it does have low breathing, and so from a video perspective, again, it's going to be very good. I noticed the autofocus was very fast paired with the XH2S, and I think honestly, it's going to be a perfect lens for the XH2S for those that are looking for that longer reach and for birding and other types of you know, nature type of photography.
Definitely.
I actually wanted to mention that the fact that it's a perfect lens also for videographers. I mean, the fact that you have the stabilization system, I mean, it makes total sense. And a lot of people that do video are going to be really grateful to have that to complete actually the set of focal lengths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's to me just a phenomenally versatile lens. The other lens that we announced was the XF 18 to 120 power zoom lens. And I know a lot of people that are sort of filmmakers or documentary people, it's a great range of focal length, but it's got that great power zoom capability. So we can instantly choose manual focus or autofocus with it, and being able to rack that zoom through the power controls. I love being able to hit the wide or the tele button and letting it do that really slow rack of the zoom. So if you wanted to really emphasize something and zoom into it, you can do that with a push of a button, and same thing to pull out from it.
Yeah, and the speed is actually adjustable. So you have various levels of speed, so it can go really fast, or it can go slower or very slow. So definitely this is a good thing. Sorry, Daniel, I cut you out on this.
I remember I had a conversation with Alfonso Parra, the great DP, and he always mentions that this about the zoom lenses, that we always talk about how convenient they are, that we have several focal lengths in just one lens. But he actually emphasized a lot about the narrative possibilities of having a zoom lens. Like you can use zoom in footage like in a poetic way that it makes sense with the story you're telling. So it is just not about convenience, it's about the creative possibilities of having a great zoom lens as this is.
Yeah. So Francis, now we got to play with it a lot in terms of making content with it a little bit, and we were preparing to have multiple lenses to film the shoot, but we found out like this new lens, the 18 to 120 here, it sounds like an f4, so it sounds kind of slow, but actually we're able to create as our A cam, our talking points. And then as sort of like this B-roll footage, we didn't have to switch lenses. I was really shocked to see how the footage looks really great for close-up, B-roll shots of the product that we were talking about, and that there was that separation, that, generally we use a prime lens, like the 33 f1.4 was our lens to go to for this, but now we don't have to do this, which makes filming so simple. So I like the fact that, surprisingly, this lens is very, very capable, like, and not to brag or anything like that, but we're able to actually, I think going forward, just have this lens to do everything that we need. Like, we do talk points, we do B-rolls, and it does it both. It has sort of a minimal focus distance, like most of our lenses do. It's obviously weather resistant, like most new lenses. But the fact that we were able to create B-roll with this, and thinking f4, you would go, but there was just perfect separation, and the images looked sharp, and I was, really surprised because I didn't expect to see that, with this lens. And now I think I'm super happy to get my production sample so that we can just continue to use this to film, all of our content.
Yeah, because again, the Fuji Guys channel is me and Billy, and we don't want to carry, like, we used to carry multiple lenses, but having that just XH2S, the 18 and 120, and then microphones and some NDs, let's say, it's the dream. It's the dream. So yeah, definitely excited about that. Yeah.
And then, the zoom feature, it does sound a little hokey, because who really films great footage with zoom? But the fact that it is totally customizable somewhat in speed in that sense. I was able to film Francis like do some skateboarding tricks and zoomed in to get that kind of effect as he would come closer to the ramp. And I thought that was really cool. And this lens, like, it does have, minimum focus breathing. Its optical axis is also pretty centered too. So when it's zooming, you don't get this weird effect happening as it kind of expands. It actually was very continuous. And then, my last point to me too is this, and it's this like stepless aperture, where if you are doing or going from one scene to another, then the exposure is going to be very smooth in adjustments if you have auto exposure kind of set that way. And really, it's almost cine lens like in a more, I guess, budget friendly perspective. And I say budget, but I'm kind of blown away by the versatility and the quality of this lens.
Yeah, as you can tell, we're pretty excited about this lens.
Well, absolutely, and for the price point and that aperture. Okay, so it's f4, really flexible depth of field to use, but then not having that, like most of a photo, I'm going to use air quotes, photo zoom lens, right? As you zoom it, you're going to hit a magic point where the aperture has to change slightly, right? And the camera sees that, and we'll get that little brightness jump or that little blip. This camera, you can run from the whole range of the zoom, and it just doesn't, you don't see that. It's completely stepless. They figured out how to make that work really smoothly and slick in a electronically controlled aperture, where usually that's a problematic, where it doesn't work quite right for a cinema application. I think that paired with the stepless shutter speeds that we have now on the camera can give a lot of flexibility to documentary work, and to just like anyone on a run and gun or wants to be that I think you guys said naked solution. That's just a bare bones camera and not having all of the extra gear on it. You don't need it. This camera with ProRes, with all the other capability that we have, we can produce some pretty amazing footage just with a single camera and a single lens.
Absolutely. Very excited about that. So should we talk a little bit about the roadmap? What's coming up for X Series? Exciting stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. Really exciting stuff with this roadmap that that the team in Japan shared with us. So we've got the next generation, the 56mm f1.2 is getting a upgrade. So it's now going to be weather resistant. They're adding that into the optical design. I know they've tweaked slightly the optical design on it and really focused on the beautiful bokeh that the lens delivers already. The other lenses that we've got a 30mm f2.8 macro lens. So for anyone that's looking for a little bit shorter of a macro than the 80, this is another option for you here to have that slightly, slightly wide of normal kind of macro lens. That's a great little option for everybody. Going to be really small, really compact. And then we've got the 8mm f3.5 ultra wide angle lens. And I know, Francis and Billy, I know you guys are excited about this, the skateboarding work and some of the other action work that you do. Having that really wide field of view is kind of a great thing. The team in Japan dropped one last bombshell on us. They referenced and announced the pair of XH2 cameras, right? So we got the XH2S that we talked about, we focused on today, but they've also got an XH2 coming at 40 megapixels. And this is kind of a really exciting announcement that we're going to have these two flagship cameras, and it's really going to have, pick your poison ultimately on this, I think is going to be the question as to what type of work do you do? Are you a landscape photographer doing high resolution type work and wanting the extra resolution or the extra speed of the S camera? What do you think, guys?
It's going to be a hard choice. To me, it's like, do I want a lot of resolution or do I want speed? It's going to be a hard sell. I mean, well, not really. For me, I think the XH2S is going to be the answer because I'm as I shifted more towards video, it just makes more sense to me. I think just the stack sensor and, low rolling shutter and all that. I think to me, it's kind of a done deal, but definitely going to be interesting having 40 megapixel in the X3 system. Very interesting.
I think personally, what's going to be welcome with Fujifilm users is probably that high resolution, right? Because most people don't do video. There's as much as we see a lot of video content, I think our base customers, a lot of them are into photography and stills, and high resolution is definitely what we love to see, and APS-C to expand it. Because many years ago they talked about 26 megapixels, and that's going to be rounded off, and then technology is not going to get any more. But the fact that we can surpass that to get over to 40 megapixel on a somewhat compact system, like we talk about APS-C. So I think a lot of people are going to appreciate that model. It's still going to probably do video for sure, but from a high resolution perspective, I think people are looking for 40 megapixels. And, this is why we're launching all these lenses. That's why all these lenses are being launched too, right? Like we can't forget that this upcoming 56 and all the lenses that we just recently launched, the 18 mil and the 23 mil versions too, they support technically this high resolution sensor that's coming out. So, this is just one thing to note, that now that we know that there is a sensor like that coming out, that if you are in the system already, then you may have to upgrade the lenses to support this higher resolution to get the best possible quality, right? So yeah, I think from my perspective, the high resolution probably is going to be what people will find a lot of interest in our lineup.
It's really exciting and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, there was a gap between the APS-C usual sensors of Fujifilm and for the GFX system. So it makes sense to fill in that gap. And of course, 40 megapixel from this kind of sensor is just, we are really excited to see how is that going to look. And as you guys were mentioning, you know, videographers and photographers really need bespoke kind of gear, and it totally makes sense to have like these two cameras go hand to hand.
Yeah, I just hope you know that you know the development team is able to maintain, you know, its high ISO capabilities still, you know, low noise and dynamic range as well. So you know, he's hoping when we get our hands on that to see how that is. That's always my concern, is going too much megapixels you know, can cause, but you know, who knows? Technology is definitely improving, and we see this in even the XH2S sensor, you know, being capable of 14 stops of plus of dynamic range, right? So yeah, I think that's exciting. What a X Summit, right? In terms of what's being launched, and pretty excited for these to come if they can't come any sooner. You know, I think our viewers are probably, you know, hoping, you know, that this stuff is available soon. So
Daniel, Billy, and Francis, I'd like to thank you for joining me today for this first sort of inaugural X Summit of the Americas. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your days to be here. And everyone watching, thank you. And hopefully you're as excited about these announcements as we are.
Definitely.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you later.